And you introduced something called metaphysics. So tell me what metaphysics is.
Meta means beyond, and so basically, it's beyond physics. So what you're getting is, the science looks at physics, the physical world, and metaphysics. It considers the physical world. It considers religion, but it considers everything else too: philosophy, ESP, all of the other things. So it takes everything that you could possibly think of, and it puts it into the package that says, okay, we have to consider that. We can't have certain elements, like science says, well, ESP doesn't exist. Well, ESP does exist, and so that needs to be considered when we're trying to figure out, what's going on around us.
Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. Welcome to another episode of Grief to Growth, where we delve into the essence of being, the mysteries of existence, and the journey through life's ups and downs. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a regular listener, I'm your host, Brian Smith, and I'm thrilled to have you with us today. And I'm really thrilled to have our guest today. His name is David Gaggin. He's a remarkable individual whose life's work embodies the quest for understanding the deeper truths of our existence, all the stuff we talk about here on Grief to Growth, the nature, reality, the big questions. David is an accomplished electrical engineer, so we're fellow engineers. And in case you don't know, I'm a chemical engineer, and he's made significant contributions to the fields of aviation and defense. But he's also embarked on a profound spiritual journey, seeking answers to some of life's most fundamental questions. Who am I? Where am I? And why am I here? He's the author of Our Eternal Existence, a Metaphysical Perspective of Reality. It's a book that blends a unique blend of science, spirituality, and metaphysics to explore the essence of who we are and the reality that we inhabit. With the career spanning roles from designing flight control systems for Boeing helicopters to being the CEO of Cobham Defense Electronic Systems, and even hosting the Common Sense Spirituality Show, his diverse experiences have helped shape his intriguing perspectives on metaphysics, science, religion, consciousness, and the power of thoughts and beliefs. All this stuff I love to talk about. So today we're going to dive deep into those themes. We're going to challenge the conventional boundaries between science and spirituality, and we're going to explore the metaphysical view of the world that David passionately advocates. Through our conversation, we really aim to uncover how thoughts shape our reality, the importance of beliefs in our daily lives, the fundamental nature of consciousness, and the profound connection that we share with the divine. So with that, I want to welcome David Gaggin to Grief to Growth.
Hi, Brian. Nice to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm as you could tell from our conversation before and from the intro, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. Just to let you know a little bit about my background. As I mentioned, I'm a chemical engineer. I love exploring this kind of stuff. And as I was reading your bio and about your book, I'm like, this is the guy I want to have one and talk about this stuff with. But before we get started, we have this battle, we feel like, between science and religion, and you introduced something called metaphysics. So tell me what metaphysics is.
Meta means beyond, and so basically, it's beyond physics.
Hmm.
So what you're getting is, the science looks at physics, the physical world, and metaphysics. It considers the physical world. It considers religion, but it considers everything else too: philosophy, ESP, all of the other things. So it takes everything that you could possibly think of, and it puts it into the package that says, okay, we have to consider that. We can't have certain elements, like science says, well, ESP doesn't exist. Well, ESP does exist. So we need to consider that if you're trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I guess there was a kind of a split between science and religion, a couple hundred years ago, where science said we're going to just study the physical, and religion said we're just going to study the spiritual, and we stay in our silos. And it sounds like you're saying metaphysics is considering everything.
Right. It pulls it pulls them both in. If you and a lot of times some people they get down on religion and say, hey, it's it's a lot of dogma and such, and obviously there is a lot of dogma in it. But if you go back long enough, you go back to the Bhagavad Gita, you go back to the early religions, the early things that Jesus said. That's good stuff. And so that needs to be considered when we're trying to figure out, what's going on around us. So you really need to take the whole picture into account.
Yeah. So what got you interested in the metaphysical?
Well, that's a good question. When I was in high school, my dad he was an avid reader, and he'd give me things like Velikovsky's World in Collision, and and I'm like 14 or something. "Hey, read this," and I'd read it, and he'd say, "What do you think?" And I'd say, "Dad, I don't have a clue." And he'd give me Aku Aku and Easter Island stuff, and he said, "What do you think?" I don't know, but I couldn't help but notice that I wasn't getting taught any of it in school. And then I'd go to church, and I'd look around, and I'd see all this beautiful stained glass windows and the robes on the priests and the ministers, and I'd think, I don't know what the answer is, but this probably isn't it. And so I was just curious. I was curious all my life, and then then I had to go make a living, so I became an engineer.
Hmm.
And but I always studied the everything I could along the way to see if I could figure out what's going on.
Yeah, my background, I guess, is similar. And again, I was like, okay, they're telling me this one thing in religion, and science is saying something completely different. What if they're both right in a sense? So I think a lot of times people feel like we have to make a choice between one or the other.
Yeah, I think you're right, each one has its own piece. But if you
Hmm.
look at you look at science and you say quantum theory, we can figure out what's going on there. But if you tie that in with metaphysics, all of a sudden metaphysics starts explaining how that really works, how quantum theory works as an example.
Hmm.
And so yeah, you have to think of it all. You have to look at all of the stuff that's around us to really understand what the heck's going on.
And I know that you would say that consciousness is fundamental. So first of all, what is consciousness to you, and in what way is it fundamental?
Consciousness is an attribute of energy. And to me, energy is the only thing that exists. That's everything that we see, all the forms that we see, all the shapes. It's just energy in a specific form. And so consciousness is an element, an attribute of that energy, which means that everything is conscious, conscious to some level. And what we're trying to do is evolve. What everything is trying to do is evolve to expand our consciousness. So when we would look at, for example, an atom is conscious. Now, it's not conscious like you and I are conscious, but it's self-aware, and it's aware of its surroundings. So its awareness would be much smaller and more confined than ours, but it is growing and it is evolving on its own. And our consciousness started out around there too. So we've all come a long way. And the beauty of it is we have a long way to go.
Yeah. So the idea that consciousness is fundamental is the idea that consciousness is it is what everything is created of, is what I think I hear you saying.
Exactly. Everything is conscious. And it's all created from energy, but that energy is conscious energy. And that's everything. That's God, that's everything. The life force is the energy is the life force, and that life force is conscious. So that's You can't make any, you can't create something that's not conscious. In other words, our car is conscious, but our car is very different than us. Our car has no intent. You and I have an intent to do something, to evolve, to expand ourselves. Our car has no intent. Our Volkswagen that doesn't intend to become a Mercedes. It's
Mm.
just it just kind of is. And in time, that car, all the conscious parts of that car, will leave the car and they'll go somewhere else and they'll evolve somewhere else. They won't stop evolving, but they won't be a car anymore. They may remember being parts of that car, but they won't be a car. They'll be something else.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept, and it seems to go back to, I think, a lot of religions, in the past have taught that everything is conscious, that the trees are conscious, that the water is conscious, that the rocks are conscious, and we've moved away from that in our materialistic scientific world. We said, well, no, this is consciousness, and that's not conscious.
Exactly. And as you look down, you look down and you say, well, you look at your pet and you know your pet is conscious, so it's not just humans, it's the pets. Well, farther down the animal line, they're clearly conscious too, because you can see when they die. Well, plants are conscious, and a lot of people don't realize that, but there's been a lot of very interesting experiments done on plants where plants will actually recognize somebody who goes by. If one they saw an interesting article where somebody intentionally, because it was an experiment, burned a leaf of a plant,
Hmm.
and it had and they had instruments on the plants to see how it reacted, and when that person came by again, it would recoil. It wouldn't recoil with the other people, but it would recoil. It knew what that person had done to it. So you can start to see where consciousness, even our science is starting to see where how consciousness goes down. Well, of course, it goes down a lot lower than that too. But it's kind of interesting that the science is coming along. They're just a long way from it. But there's a lot of people, individual scientists, that are realizing that the world is not as it appears to be.
Yeah, I've heard the expression that science progresses one funeral at a time. It's,
I like it. I like
yeah,
it. I like it, Brian.
yeah. You've got to get these guys out of the way that have this paradigm that says, and it's funny when we talk about consciousness in animals, and you said, of course, we know our pets are conscious, but when my daughter was in college working on her psychology degree, they were debating about this, and there were people in her class who were debating that animals aren't conscious, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me! How could you not recognize that animals are conscious?
Yeah, exactly. It's some of the things that go on in our colleges are questionable at best.
Yeah, and the experiment you mentioned, I heard recently there's an experiment where when they put plants and they'll have like two dishes at the bottom, one with water in it and one without water in it, and the plant will grow toward the dish with the water in it. That is expressing to me intent, is showing consciousness. And I guess they even put like a recording of running water under one side and the plant would grow toward that.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, really. Really interesting stuff.
So, what is the implication of consciousness being fundamental and consciousness being what everything and everything being conscious?
Well, I think, I think it just changes our whole perspective of the world and where we are and why we're here. When we think of ourselves as, being plopped down here and we don't know why, and
Mhm.
everything, and we're very different from everything else. And it turns out we're not different from everything else. We're the same as everything else. And religion is big to say, yeah, well, there's God out there, and God and you are very different. And the fact of the matter is, we're different in the level of consciousness, without a doubt. But our substance, our fundamental substance, isn't different. We're just not very far along on the path compared to where the Tao or the universal consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, God, is. So the implication is huge, and it also it tells you that, hey, this isn't a one shot deal. You know, you're not just coming down here having a life and then bingo, that's the end of it. And the thing about that is that you're end up responsible for your actions, and once you realize you're responsible for your actions, you'll think twice about some of the actions that you decide to do. What goes around comes around. You know, you're not going to be a terrorist if you think that you know, you're going to be caught up by a terrorist next time around. You know, so you're going to think differently about how you treat other people, and other
Hmm.
people are going to think differently of how they treat you. World will be a lot better if you know, you realize that, hey, we're all part of one, and we're just trying to learn about basically ourselves. You know, that's what God's trying to, or Tao or universal consciousness. He's trying to learn about itself, because that's all that exists. Everything is within the Tao. And so, you know, so what are we trying to learn about? We're trying to learn about ourselves, our little tiny piece of the Tao. And
Hmm.
that's, you know, and that's what our focus is.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept that I ran across. I read Tom Campbell's book, My Big Toe, My Big Theory of Everything, and he talks about, you know, the creation of the how everything came into existence, which sounds similar to like maybe the Christian creation story, but we've said that God is perfect, God is complete within God's self, God doesn't need to learn anything, God doesn't need to grow. And my understanding of this is like the exact opposite, that God is learning through being us.
Without a doubt. And you know, that's, can you imagine what hell would really be if you were never going to learn anything and you were just sat there perfect? I mean, that's no way to go through eternity. And so, you know, the value of learning is what gives us a value of enjoyment and existence. And so you're not going to get, you know, God is not going to want to be something that is stagnant, is, you know, is complete.
Hmm.
God is evolving just like the rest of us. It's just evolved farther, a lot farther, but still farther. And we have a chance. We'll never catch up, but we'll always have new, interesting things that we're learning, we're growing, and what we learn goes into God's database, because
Right.
God, you know, he's using us to help him learn. And I use the him only because that's the way our language works. You know,
Right.
there is no gender except when you're in the physical world.
Yeah, I just said that that kind of flips what some religions teach on its head, that God is, you know, again, God's complete, God is perfect. And when we say learning, it's not necessarily gaining knowledge, but gaining experience. What's it like to whatever?
Right. That's really how we do learn. We have experiences, and
Right.
that's what we come down here to learn, to do, to experience, and what comes out of it is a psychological understanding of something. And it's you know, we think we have physical experiences, but all of these physical things around us, like this computer that you and I are working on, and my desk and my chair, and you know, these are just items, they're symbols that allow me to have a psychological experience with you. And that's all that there is. They're psychological experiences, and those are the experiences that are remembered by our inner self and get transferred up to the, you know, to our soul and you know, inner spirit, and end up it's those psychological experiences that end up in the Akashic records, if you will. To you know, it's not the physical stuff. Physical stuff is not going to be around here forever, but those psychological experiences will be around forever. And so it's the psychological experiences that really are the only thing that matter. The rest of it is, you know, they're tools that allow us to have events and you know, and discussions and whatever.
So when it comes to the metaphysical, how do we study something like that? How do we even go about to explore that?
Well, there's a lot of ways. There there are channels that you can use. Michael is one of the ones that I use. Shepherd Hoodwin was, and he is in Our Eternal Existence. He did the foreword for me. He's a channel for an entity, and an entity is basically 1,000 souls. So this is his definition of it,
Hmm.
and it's 1,000 souls that have gotten together, and they've had their experiences on this planet. They're done with the physical planet for at least this particular grand cycle for a while
Hmm.
anyway.
Hmm.
And they're happen to be in the causal plane, which is the next one up. We have seven fields of creation, and the causal plane or field, if you will, is the one right above the astral, and the astral is the one that we go to when we die, and we go back and forth between the astral and the physical. Well,
Hmm.
anyway, this group eventually comes together, and they came here together, and they left together, and they're up in the causal field. In the causal field, one of the things you do is you interface and try to help humanity in whatever level you can. After you go up into the higher fields, you get away. Generally, you get away from humanity for a while. But what you do is you talk to them, and they give you answers, and they're fascinating. You can ask them anything you want, and they'll give you an answer. And they're fascinating people. But and Seth was another one. She
Hmm.
came through Jane Roberts, and some people are saying that they can contact Seth right now. I haven't been all that pleased with the ones that I've looked at
Hmm.
that are contacting Seth now, but I'm very pleased with what Jane Roberts did. Of course,
Oh, yeah.
she died in the 80s, I guess it was 1980s, thereabouts. So anyway, yeah, you can study it. There is information there, and quite frankly, there's a lot of out of body experiences are a good way to study aspects of it.
Hmm.
Near death experiences, a lot of those, and they're basically out of body experiences,
Right.
certain aspect of an out of body experience. But there's a lot of ways to that you can look at them. You can look at apparitions, and then you say, okay, what's an apparition? Do they really exist? Well, they do exist, and it's just it's a particular soul that hasn't stopped focusing. It's lost its body, but it hasn't stopped focusing on the physical world, and so it's kind of halfway in between. And part of its consciousness is still available in its aura, and around. It won't be forever, but it's
Hmm.
so there's a whole bunch of ways. All these ESP things that they're doing. Remote viewing is an interesting way to do
Hmm.
it. Russell Targ did some fabulous work on that stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways to study metaphysics.
And it's interesting as you say that because science has kind of tiptoed around it. They've studied precognition, they've studied ESP, they've studied remote viewing, of course, a little bit of like telekinesis, and they'll dabble in it, but then you'll get some people that call themselves hardcore scientists who will swear because they can't explain it that it cannot exist, that
Yeah,
it can't exist.
right. But then they can't explain quantum mechanics, and yet they accept that. So where do you go there?
But they bought into that kicking and screaming though. They were
They did it. They did indeed.
so it's like no, right? Einstein didn't even like the idea
No, he
of
didn't. No, he
yeah.
didn't. No, he didn't. David Bohm. You remember David Bohm? He probably wrote the quintessential book on quantum mechanics, and his book is well, you really got it. If you wanted to really study his book, it's a deep book.
Hmm.
But he's had other books that he talked more philosophically,
Hmm.
and he worked with Einstein for years, and they had a falling out when he said, "Hey, there's this quantum mechanics is real, and Einstein wouldn't go along with it, so they kind of split ways. But interesting guy.
And it's funny as we talk about consciousness, and I think about some of these, so-called philosophers. I can't remember the guy's name at the moment, but he basically said because they can't explain consciousness, said, well, it doesn't exist. It's an illusion. It's an elaborate illusion that we fooled ourselves into thinking we have consciousness. And I just laugh when I hear stuff like that.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Some otherwise intelligent people,
Yeah,
they just can't see it. I mean, how many scientists have said, "Hey, we're the only planet out there with life on it." I mean,
right.
it's just hard to understand that people could think that way, but they do.
So, when you have this philosophy, this view of life, where that religion kind of says, okay, well, that's not right because God is this or that, and science says, well, that's not even possible. How do we bring this to people and so they don't just dismiss it as, because when you were talking about like channeling and out of body experiences, I hear the word woo woo all the time. Oh,
Yeah,
that's woo woo.
yeah. You have to be ready for it.
Mm,
There's a lot of people that aren't ready for it yet, but more and more people are coming. More and more people are becoming ready to look at the world and realize that we live in this illusion, and to understand it. The age. Michael says that the age of mankind is growing because there's 5 different ages that we're here. There's infant, baby, young, mature, and old. There's a couple
mm,
other ages, but we don't go through those in the physical plane here.
mm,
And if you get as many old people that are dying and going out the other end, and infants coming in, then the age of mankind is not going to go anywhere. But apparently, because of the difficulty in our society, they've stopped putting new infants in. And therefore, mankind, our culture is getting older and older. And right now, we're about level 5 or 6
interesting.
mature. And as as you said, as people die, then they come back at a little bit higher level than they were before. And so you've got all of these people coming back at a higher level. We're getting smarter, we're getting wiser. The whole culture is. You and I don't see it so much because we see such a snapshot in time, such a
Hmm.
small instance. But if you took a broader picture of it, the world is getting wiser because of that.
I have never heard that before, but that makes sense to me. So because people I've heard also on this planet, like, okay, we're like a baby planet. We have a bunch of baby souls around here that don't know what they're doing, and I could see like whatever is looking at this, overseeing, going, we have a problem here. We've got to up the intelligence of this planet.
Yes, and that's exactly what's happening. But we are in an R&D environment, and not just us. This whole universe is an R&D environment,
Hmm.
and they're trying to figure out. There's a lot of different souls at about our level, and I say a lot. I couldn't even give you a number. Around the universe
Hmm.
that the Tao, if you will, is trying to figure out what's the best way to evolve these souls.
Hmm.
So on our planet, we have been given an unlimited amount of aggression that we
Yeah.
can do. Well, some planets, the aggression gets capped. You only get so frustrated, and all of a sudden, bingo, you're capped,
Hmm.
and that makes for a much pleasanter planet, but you don't grow as fast as we're allowed to grow here. Now, the problem with here is we have the capability of dissolving ourselves, right?
Exactly.
Self-destruction. But what happens if we do? Well, we could ruin the planet. But what would happen is we would make the planet so it was uninhabitable for certainly us, and maybe everything else that's on here, in the way of plants and animals. But whatever it was, what we would do, we just end up, we'd all learn a lesson. The Tao would learn a lesson, and we go to some other planet and and continue our evolution. So
Mhm.
it's not the end of the world if it happens, but we're an experiment. We are allowed to be unlimited. Our aggression it can be unlimited. And so, so makes for a tough life. But we chose it. We weren't told to come here. We were offered an opportunity to come here because we could evolve faster if we made the right decisions than we could in other places. So that's why we came here, to
Yeah,
have this tough life.
I have a friend who's very metaphysical and out of body experiences and stuff like that. And we were having lunch one day, and I'll never forget. He was like, because I think he said he was Pleiadian, and he said you can learn more in like 10 minutes on Earth. You can learn in like 10,000 years in some other environments because of the contrast. And so when we're here, we view this as like, this is a disaster. This is a mess. Why would God allow, this to happen? But it's because of it that challenge allows us to grow.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And the other thing is, we fear death because we don't understand it. But death
Yes.
is just changing your focus. Death is, you wouldn't want it any other way. You wouldn't want to be down here in this body forever and ever. You want to go and start fresh and start new. And so what you do is when it comes time to die, and by the way, we plan our death just like we plan our birth. So it depends on what path we choose, and we have a complicated pre-life plan that does that. But
Hmm.
we pick one of these paths as we go along the way, and that path tells us when we're going to exit, when we're getting out of here. The spiritual world knows when you and I are going to die. We don't know, but the spiritual world does. And our inner self, our inner soul knows certainly, but we don't. But once you realize that death is a nothing, it's just a finish of this particular personality, but the mind, and your inner self is remembers everything, and then it goes back and digests what it did and tries to learn from it, and then the soul creates another personality. So Dave Gaggin and Brian Smith are never coming back again, but our soul is coming back, and our personalities will always exist, and we'll just come back in a different form with different biases and different experiences that we want to do, that the soul wants to do. It's the soul that's making these decisions up, and so we end up death is really something that's not to be worried about. And once you get over your fear of death, then you can start to live a
Yeah,
lot better.
that's a great point. And you just said something that's an understanding that I've come to only recently in the last several years. Because again, we hear some religions say that we reincarnate, and then we hear some Christians say we absolutely do not, because a man only dies once, and whatever that verse is that they pull out. And I think I always look at like, how do we reconcile these two things? So I see it kind of, I think the way you said it's like the soul creates a personality like a Brian or a Dave Gagan, and we come here. There's only one life as Brian. There's only one Brian will not come back here, but my
Right.
soul will create another personality that's an aspect of the soul that will have the experiences, and those experiences kind of roll up into the soul.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And your psyche, your parts of your consciousness, will be in the subconscious of that personality. In other
Hmm.
words, our subcon we have when I break it up in our eternal existence in three ways, and I
Hmm.
say, okay, we have an ego, and that ego is the part of our consciousness that focuses on the physical plane, and
Right.
that ego runs the show when it's here because it has to. It
Right.
has to make the decision to step back if a bus is coming. And so it runs it. Then we have a subconscious, and that subconscious runs our body, and it pumps our heart, and it breathes for us, and it does all, releases the hormones and does everything. But there's another part of the subconscious that has all of our past memories in it, and all our past lives. And so the personalities that our soul created, in this time around, they're all in our subconscious. So we have access to that information, and a lot of that is your intuition. That you think you ought to do something. If you go against your intuition, you're going against something you already learned. And I don't know how many times you've gone against your intuition, but every time I've done it, it never works out too well.
Yeah, I think that's what makes sense to me, and that's something that I haven't heard a lot of people speak of it that way. Again, it's usually it's the one or the other. Either there's reincarnation, or there's not. But there's I love the way you put that. It's like all of our other, because what we call our past lives, they're all still with us, and that's why we have, I think, a lot of the tendencies that we have, and you can see children do not come in as blank slates. They just absolutely do not.
Absolutely do not. When you see a Mozart writing a concert when he's 5, you pretty much know that that child had a whole bunch, when he showed up, and everybody does. Everybody's a little different, but everybody shows up with a whole bunch of capabilities.
And for people that are new to these concepts, one of the questions we always get is like, well, what's the point of me forgetting everything? If I've learned all this stuff before and I come back here and I can't remember anything, then what's the point? Why the veil, or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, well, that's just kind of the way it goes. You have to forget, because one, you work with other people and they're the same people. Maybe there's a lot of them, but for example, your parents might have been your children before.
Hmm.
Well, you couldn't function if you had those two relationships going. So you have to forget what you had, because again, what you're here to learn is to have experiences, and
Hmm.
those experiences are the key thing. And it doesn't, if you make a mistake, well, that's fine, but because you've come at that particular problem from a different perspective. In other words, you come down here and you have biases, you have attitudes, and you have modes you're in, and you have roles that you're playing. And
Hmm.
these are physical biases, or psychological biases that you have. So you're different. So when you come down there and you have the same experience, it's not really the same experience, because you're coming at that problem from a different perspective.
Right.
So it's a different aspect of that. So it may seem like, it may look like you made the same mistake again, but you made whatever you did it from a different perspective. So you're really learning things very
Hmm.
differently. You're having different experiences. And as you said earlier, it's really the experiences that we're here to have. And that's what we learn from all of these experiences.
Yeah, and it's funny because sometimes I don't know why it seems like the memories or whatever break through. We have these children that'll look at their parents and say things like, "Well, when I was big, or when I was a World War II fighter pilot," and they'll describe all the people that they were with, and their plane, and the ship that they were on, and stuff like that. And I just find that kind of stuff fascinating when it seems like the veil gets kind of thin or broken through every once in a while.
It does, and it's usually the children, because Ian Stevenson, I don't know if you're familiar
Oh
with
yeah,
him.
yeah.
He did a lot of studies on children, and he said that he found many of them that remembered their past life, and you're talking about 5-year olds, 4, 5, 6-year olds, and by the time that they were teenagers, 12, 13, most of them had forgotten completely.
Right.
And by the time they were done their teenage years, every one of them had forgotten. So, this veil most of the people don't, the veil is pretty heavy when you're born, but even for the ones that the veil is, that they can see through and peek through, that will be closed, as they grow up and become adults.
Yeah, are you familiar with Christian Sundberg?
Sundberg, no.
He wrote a book called A Walk in the Physical, and he talks about when he came in. He describes being veiled and coming in and all that. And I guess even when he was born, the veil, he had like he knew what was going to happen. He remembered his plan and everything, but it went away when he was like 5. And then he started having memories again when he was like 30. So he's kind of like been this back and forth thing where it's like, but I guess when he made the agreement to come here, he said, I want to be able to see through the veil, otherwise I'm not going. So he had that deal.
Well, you can do that. You can set that up as that's one of the experiences that you want to have. Yeah. But and I'll tell you, you can see, you go to a medium, and these mediums, they can see through parts of the veil. That's why they're able to, communicate with, the other side, what we call the other side.
Right.
Because they have this telepathic capability. We all have it, but they have it. They control theirs, and it's a little stronger than what we have.
Right. Right. Well, you talked about channeling earlier, and it's my perception. It seems like there are a lot more channels. I maybe people are just talking about it, but I keep hearing more and more channels and people channeling different entities. So I've read the Seth materials. It's fascinating stuff. And on the spot here, I can't think of some of the other entities that people are channeling, but there are people channeling all these different entities. You mentioned Michael, and Michael, again, we think of them as individuals, but it's really a collection of souls or beings. And you mentioned a little bit about what they're telling us, but I keep hearing kind of like what you said, that the mankind is evolving. We're on the cusp of something bigger, some sort of a breakthrough. Has that been your experience? Have you heard that?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And you get that from I've got that from both through Seth and Michael, and they're saying, that there's a lot of wise young beings reincarnating these days,
Hmm.
and it's and society is indeed moving forward. And yes, there is, there will be some major changes along the way. I don't know how sudden they'll be, but there'll be major changes. But it's funny how the other thing that Michael made very clear is that we're only given a certain amount of technology. We weren't given the atomic bomb until they thought we could handle it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it was a wise decision, but in any case, it was a decision. We won't be allowed to, so they say, we won't be allowed to interface with other less developed civilizations until we learn how to get rid of killing in our own. Now, they'll let us interface with more developed because we can't hurt them. But we have to, for us to have other areas opened up to us, we have to change ourselves and as a culture, and we're doing it, and they're helping us do it.
Yeah, you mentioned something really interesting there. It's kind of an aside, I guess, but you talked about technology, and I'm sorry, I'm in the belief that our technology does come from the other side, and it's interesting because science fiction writers, they predicted like stuff like we have now. I think that was channeled. It was like who could ever envision wireless communication or pictures going television, stuff like that. So so you're saying that they're just kind of like, okay, these guys, they can't handle this, so we can't have that, and they can't have that until they're more mature.
Right. I agree with you 100%. Everything that is created here had its origin in the spiritual world. Everything. And so we're given some, a lot of these guys like Tesla and Einstein, they'll tell you that this kind of came to them.
Hmm.
And you don't just sit there and figure it out. Somebody is giving that to you and bringing that along and entering that into society.
Hmm.
There's a lot of very, very wise beings that are helping us evolve and trying to figure. They're not perfect, but they're very wise, and they're trying to figure out what's a good way for us to develop and evolve, because that's really the whole idea, is for us as a society and us as individuals to evolve and become wiser as
Hmm.
we go along.
Now, have you heard about some of these ancient civilizations that had like super advanced technology that I don't know for whatever reason they're not here anymore?
Yeah, I did. I'm not sure that they're not here anymore, quite
Hmm.
frankly. I'm
Okay.
pretty confident that they are, but they're not playing the role that they used to play. I'll give you that. But I asked Michael. I said, "How old's the pyramid?" And he says, "Well, it's a lot harder question than you would expect,
Mm.
because there's a lot of other aspects of time that are harder to explain." But he said, to give you the best answer that I can, he said the Great Pyramid was about is about 16, 17,000 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I said, who built it? And he said, an alien civilization provided the technology for man to build it. And you can see that it's all over the planet.
Hmm.
It's just so obvious that there was an advanced society living here. Right now we're saying, well, the guys that built the Great Pyramid were, they just came out of the woods or the desert and put this thing together. I mean, we couldn't
Right.
do it today, and I mean, it's silly stuff. But that's what mainstream. That's all that they're hanging their hat on it, because they don't. Otherwise, they don't want to admit that there's a spiritual world behind the physical world. And
Hmm.
that's got them saying some really crazy things. The Big Bang Theory is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
you know it just didn't happen. But the implications are big, because now all of a sudden you're going to have people saying, what, I got one shot at being living here, there's nothing afterwards, and therefore greed is the name of my game.
Yeah.
And that's a real problem. And that's so their science in that from that perspective is doing a lot of harm, because you can't take science and create an ethical a set of standards out of it. You have to. Religion tried, but then the too many guys got their oar in the water, and they screwed it up along the way.
Right.
But you need something like metaphysics, which is the only way you're ever going to get an ethical standard put into this culture. You have to people have to accept responsibility for their own actions, and you need an ethical standard for them to do that, for them to understand why that's critical.
Yeah, I think what you just said is so important, because I know a lot of materialists, atheists, materialists try to say, well, we can be moral without religion, and it's really interesting because we do have this influence of religion in our society, whether we want to deny it or not. So at least that gave us something to start with, because
Right.
if you just come from the material, and I am just a accident of nature, and there are no morals by that materialistic standard. There's no and there are no consequences beyond whatever short life I have. Then why not do anything? There's really, if you're just going to come from that perspective, there's no reason to respect anybody else or anything else.
That's exactly right. And we used to leave it up to parents, and they tried to do it, and some parents do it. They help, but a lot of people need more than that, and it's pretty clear that a lot of people need more than that. And so I think that's really hurting our our evolution, quite frankly.
I think it is too. I think we took a big step backward when we moved away from, again, religion, spirituality, as flawed as it might have been. At least it told us something about the questions that you and I'd like to explore:
Right.
who we are, why we're here, where we're going, what's the purpose of all this. If you take the metaphysical out of it, or you take the spiritual out of it, you can't answer any of those questions. And science doesn't even try. Materialism doesn't even try.
That's exactly right. And if you go back far enough, religion it had a lot of good answers. I mean, a
Yeah,
lot of good answers. You
yeah,
go back to Hinduism, has gone kind of crazy. But if you look at the basis of Hinduism, it was, Krishna and what he explained back there in the Bhagavad Gita and the Puranas and all of this stuff. That's good stuff.
hmm,
And it's, it's something that you could, that is, one, fits our metaphysical view these days. and
exactly.
and it's not, it hasn't been distorted by mankind over the time frame.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have a friend who's Hindu, and I've had him on my program a couple of times, and he was telling me about, the stuff that of Hinduism. I started looking at more of it. I'm like, this is what the metaphysical stuff, guys are telling us today. This is people like Bernardo Kastrup that introduced me to idealism, the idea that everything is consciousness. And he talks about like these creation stories, the creator, you know, fell into a dream, or the birth earth was birthed out of the creator. It's all the stuff that we're talking about is like, it's all starts with an idea. It all starts with a dream, and we are like characters in a dream. And science
Yeah.
is finally starting to come around to that. They're saying, is this a holographic universe? Does anything really exist?
Yeah. More and more people are coming around. They're coming. It's slow, and it's not mainstream these days. But then when you ask yourself, well, what is mainstream science? Well, mainstream science it's in the universities, and it's basically what the head of the department has to say.
Right.
And when he goes, then somebody else can step in, and you'll get more evolution that happens in that department as time goes on and as people go on.
Well, it's what can I get a grant for? It's like where's the money? And
Yeah,
I've realized that I'm working on a project called the Soul Phone that we've been working on for years, trying to get a physical device to communicate on the other side. And you can't get funding for something like that in mainstream science, because first of all they say it's impossible, right? And then where's the money in it? What's it going to do for me?
right. Yeah, it's all about the money. It
Yeah.
is. Yeah, which is unfortunate.
So think I heard you say, do you channel, Michael? Have you channeled?
I do not channel Michael. I do
Okay.
not. I do not. I do not have channeling capabilities that are developed well enough to do that.
Yeah, I don't either. But as I said, I think it's really interesting, and I'm finding more and more people seem to be channeling. So I'm like, it feels like, from what I'm hearing, is like we're kind of at a tipping point, and we are at a point where we know we can destroy ourselves, and we have multiple ways of destroying ourselves. It's not
Yes, we
just the
do.
atomic bomb. It's
Yes,
it's
yes, we do.
it's climate change, and there's we can take our pick. And so I wonder, it seems like, as you're saying, we're starting to get more help because we're like, okay, these guys are at a point of crisis.
Right. I think that's very, very true. Um, but as far as that, channeling is various ways. My wife died 6 years ago, and after she died, my youngest daughter was able to do automatic writing with her,
Oh, wow.
and that's very interesting. And
Hmm.
so I think people are developing these kind of capabilities, and they don't realize that they have them. But when a circumstance presents itself, and it's hard enough and it's emotional enough, then more and more people are able to tap into this interface with the other side.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear about your wife.
Thank you.
But I know that, again, it's just my perception. It's just anecdotal, but it seems like more people are tapping into, and we're getting permission now. I love, people complain about social media, they complain about the internet. I love the fact that now, like I can put this program out and someone can have access to it. And I've learned so much from like just being on YouTube and watching people channel and listening and finding out more stuff. So I think as we get permission to tap into these abilities, we all have them to a certain level, and we can develop them, and circumstances a lot of times drives us to it, right? It's the loss of that person that I really need to get in contact with that person. So the
Right.
automatic writing skill comes online.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. More and more of it's happening. More and more people are being able to uh, develop the capability that we all have. We all have
Hmm.
that capability. It's just that we don't use it as well as we could if we figured out how to do it.
Yeah, another thing I want to talk to you about I know you talk about dreams and the subconscious. So tell me about the role of dreams in our lives.
Okay, dreams are different than anything you can possibly imagine. the there is an I, and that I, that you and I have an I during the day, and that's our ego, and that's the ego is the part of our
Hmm.
consciousness. That's the I. Well, the I in your dream is not your ego, because your ego is asleep. Your ego is not focused on the dreams. The I in your in your dreams is your inner self. And
Hmm.
what's happening is when you die, and as I mentioned earlier, you know, you have all of these past personalities within your subconscious. And when you die, you have not resolved all the issues in your life. So those issues still need to be resolved. So what's happening is the dream world is indeed a reality, just like the physical world is. It's different. It runs under different universal principles. You know that a field can turn into a building, and a person can turn into another building, virtually instantaneous in your dream.
Hmm.
But that's a real thing. That's really happening. Just like it's not using the material that we have here that my desk is made out of, but it's using pseudo material, and it's very real stuff. And what it's
Hmm.
doing is the soul is going through, and it's choosing which issues it wants to experience. So it's actually going through and solving the problems that were left over from our past lives.
Hmm.
Well, the problem with that is, one, we don't see much of it, right? We see just a tip of one of these dreams when we wake up. So
Right.
we're seeing just a piece of it. Well, the other problem is these lives that they had very different symbols. Symbols meant different things. I mean, simple things like fire, right? Fire can be comforting if you're used to lying in front of a fireplace with your honey and having a nice time. Or fire can be very fearful if it burned down your house, burned down your business, and and such. So that symbol will be very different,
Hmm.
from life to life and individual to individual. Well, so will all the other symbols. So the symbols that you will have seen, and maybe a personality that lived 1,000 years ago, would mean very different things to them than they seem to you. So trying to interpret and understand what these dreams meant is an extremely difficult task. However, the good part about dreams is you and me, because we're living lives, we have number one priority for our soul to help us solve our problems. So if we go to bed at night and we try to, right before we go to sleep, or put a note under your pillow that says, I want to solve this problem, your inner conscious will solve that problem for you. It's a
Hmm.
lot easier to get to get your dreams to do what you need done than it is to understand what all these dreams mean, because you just don't have the understanding of the basic symbols that are being used in the dream world. But dreams are it's a different reality. It's not but it's a very real reality. And those experiences, you will remember them forever. and they are just as important as the physical experiences that you have in this life, your dreams.
That's a really interesting perspective, and it's funny because as I've started studying more and more, I'm having more lucid dreams, and sometimes in my dream world, I realize I'm dreaming, and I'm like, "This is really cool that I created this wall, or that sun really feels real." I'll have that thought in my dream, and I'm taking more of that into my waking life, I'm working with this woman now that calls this whole thing that we're in a dream, and she's like, the goal is to become lucid in the dream. So even I think you and I probably view it similarly. Everything around us it's just as real or just as unreal as when we're dreaming. Because when we wake up from a dream, when we're in the dream, we're like, this is real. And we wake up in our bed and we go, oh, it was just a dream.
Right. You can carry your conscious, if you train yourself well enough, you can carry your conscious self, not the ego, but your other parts of your conscious self into your dreams and see the dreams. It's not an easy task, but you can train yourself for it. It
Yeah.
sounds like you're making progress in that, and that's great.
Yeah, the idea of lucid dreaming is really, it's fascinating to me, and I'm working on that. But like I said, the other thing is becoming lucid within this dream that we're in right now, and
Well,
then
yeah.
understanding that I'm not the guy sitting in the chair. This is an avatar.
Yeah, that's about right. That's right. Your psyche is what is the real you, and this is a body that it's a vehicle. It's a vehicle to be able to experience this reality. If our inner self, our soul, if you will, can't experience this reality because it sees right through it,
Right.
and so you need to have something that has our outer senses to be able to sense it. A reality is what? Two things. It's one, the energy has to be in a certain position and
Mm,
and then certain configuration, and then you have to have the senses to be able to perceive that energy.
right.
And so we're a very complicated being to be able to actually exist in this strange reality that we're in. And it is a strange reality, very strange reality, but we're tuned to it.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about our technology gets channeled from the other side. I think a lot of our art gets channeled from the other side, and especially movies. And I see, there's a lot of movies now about the multiverse. That's a big theme in action movies actually now. But the movie, I think The Matrix, the movie Avatar, those movies have a lot of really deep metaphysical, spiritual themes to them that people I think can grasp on a certain level.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I think art comes at, and virtually everything that we get comes from the other side. We don't appreciate that, but yeah, everybody comes with certain gifts to be able to get it. And some people have stronger gifts, and they're the ones that are the Michelangelos, if you will, or the
Hmm.
or the great movie producers, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I keep coming back to the movie The Matrix, which I don't even know how long ago that was at this point, but every time I watch it, I get something different out of it. And I tie it into like the conversation that we're having today that that talks about everything being code, and there's an ultimate reality. I mean, it's not, it doesn't translate perfectly, but the idea of that these are avatars, that we're in this reality that's it's a configuration for us to have this experience.
Right.
And so, getting back to your book, and we've talked about a lot of the themes, and we've already touched on this, but tell people, if when they get this book, how it's going to change their perspective.
Okay. Our eternal existence, a metaphysical perspective of reality, will give you will allow you to have a more realistic view of who you are and what you're doing here and the world that you live in. And it gives you a much better feel for how you should act, what you should do, why you do things. And it's certainly, if you're the type of person that says, "Hey, I'm a victim, poor pitiful me, everything happens to me," it will show you that it's you made all these decisions, you created this world, and and all of your problems are self-created. And oh, by the way, because of that, you and only you can solve those problems. You can fix your problems, but nobody else can. And we always, we have a tendency to blame it on the boss or the spouse or the society or whatever we want to blame it on.
Mm-hmm.
And what we don't realize is that we create all of our problems and all of the things that go well for us. Now, we ought to take credit for the good things in our life, and we ought to realize that, hey, if we want to improve our life, whether that's our health or our financial situation or whatever, we have the capability of doing that. And so that's really what our eternal existence is all about. It's trying to put the power back in the individual so that they
Mm-hmm.
can realize that, hey, they're running their show, and nobody else is running it for them. And they chose their parents, they chose their friends, they chose their kids, they chose the world that they're living in, and how they react to the decisions that they made. That's up to them.
Yeah, that it's a very sensitive thing when we say that you chose this because sometimes people feel like, well, you're blaming me for my problems. It's not my, it's you're saying it's my fault because and even the word problem can be a problem. I like the word challenges because I do believe that we create challenges for ourselves to see how we're going to deal with them. And I've talked to people who've had near-death experiences that will say, yes, I chose this abusive father, this abusive mother. I chose to have this so my soul could grow. So for me, when you really get this, your perspective shifts as to what's a problem and what's a challenge.
Yeah.
What,
Okay. I agree with that. I agree
yeah,
with that. I think you're right. I think that's looking at it as challenges is a better way of putting it in such a way that you can handle it.
yeah.
Uh,
I, well, I
yeah.
I think that this venue, as my friend Cal calls it, this location that we're in, so it goes back to what we said near the very beginning. We have these extremes. We come in to experience the extremes. We could have chosen the cushy life. We could have chosen the place that didn't have this. But we chose this for a reason.
Right. And yeah, and it's a way to evolve faster,
Yeah,
and if but it's a difficult way,
yeah,
and but it's our choice,
yeah,
and because it's our choice, we can deal with it because we're capable of it. We never accept anything. We're never given anything that we can't deal with.
yeah. I think that point of view is so empowering. Like I said, people might hear it at first and it might feel uh, like fatalistic or whatever. But it actually, I think it's extremely empowering. It's like as you said, it puts the power back in our hands, understanding that we are these amazing eternal beings. And you talked earlier about, the fear of death, which I don't have at all anymore. And when I talk to people that are still dealing with that, and especially at my age, I'm in my early 60s now, it's like that's inevitable. Fearing that is not doing you any favors.
Right.
So you might as well embrace it. And if you think about living forever in this body, that would be torment. That would be
It would.
horrible.
It would. It would. You need it. And you look at the criminals and the terrorists and such like that. And a lot of them die young, and they die young, I think, because the soul is saying, we're going down the wrong path here. We need to reboot.
Right.
And so we need to get our psychology pointed in a different direction. And that's what death does for us. It allows us to go back, learn what our mistakes, and start afresh, start
Hmm.
anew. And,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, death is, it's the death is hard on the people that are left behind.
Right.
That's the tough part.
Right.
But for the actual person, when you die, that's a piece of cake. I mean, death can be hard, the dying process,
Right.
but death itself is a piece of cake. There's no pain involved in that. And
Yeah.
now your memory comes back. You're all set and you're happy and you're doing good things.
Absolutely. Well, David, we're at our time. It's actually 11:11 here. It's been great getting to know you, and I love this conversation. Tell people how they mention the name of the book again, but tell people how they can get in touch with you also.
Okay, it's Our Eternal Existence by David Gaggin. That's Gaggin, Gaggin,
Mhm.
and it's a metaphysical perspective of reality. You can go to my website, which is davidgaggin.com, and you can read about the book. You can the place you can hit it and takes you right to Amazon. You could buy it at Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And then also, I live in Southern Florida near Fort Myers, and I have a Sanibel Metaphysical Meetup group that if you're, it's easy to get in touch with, and it's free. I pay for it all, and
Hmm.
we get together and talk about these type of things and anything you want to talk about in the way of metaphysical stuff.
I love
So
it.
I'd love to have anybody that's in the area come by.
I love it. I love what you're doing. I love this conversation. I like bringing these worlds together. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Brian. I really appreciate it. It's great fun.